Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera to all of the students. Okay, so thank you for participating these sessions. So I being honored to be present here, and I would like to thank you to the organizer of the course, which is Dr. Faizah Cheros, for invited me to give some sharing knowledge about the flood forecasting and hazard mapping. So before I start, I am Zulkarnain bin Hassan, and I actually is a senior lecturer from the Faculty of Civil Engineering Technology at University Malaysia Police, UNIMAP. So my office actually is at the end of the Peninsula Malaysia, so it's very far from Kuala Lumpur. So before we start with the sessions, I would like to explain about the background of me. So I actually is the product from the UTM actually. So during my first degree, I take Bachelor Engineering in UTM Skudai, and then I further study in Master in Hydrology and Water Resources in UTM by research. During that time, my supervisor is Prof. Dr. Sobri Harun. And then after that, I pursued my study in PhD, also in UTM Skudai, under supervision of Prof. Dr. Sofia and also Dr. Sobri Harun. So I'm really attached with the UTM. So I'm being honored to be give these sessions. So at least I can share all my experience related to this field to you guys. So my research interest actually in hydrology and water resources. So as you can see on the slide, so my research also covers in flood forecasting and also mitigation. And then I also focus on the climate change on water resources. So this one actually is my topic during my master and also my PhD. So I look the impact of the climate change, especially to the peak discharge. So that's one of the my research interests. And then I also look on the AI, which is artificial intelligence, and also the machine learning. So because when we focus on hydrology, most of the time we using a lot of the data. So big data. So most of the time is the best way to analyze and simulate. We can using the latest method, which is the AI and also the machine learning. So that's about me. So this is the content outline for these sessions. So basically, we can divide our session into 4 sessions. The first session is we want to look on the climate change and floods, and then we want to look on the global climate model GCMs and also its scenarios. So these 2 topics actually is related to the impact of the climate change. And then at 1 until 2:30 p.m. It will break and we have a Solat Zuhur, and then from 2:30 p.m. until 5 p.m. so I will cover 2 topics, which is the first is understanding the rainfall for the flood modeling, and lastly we will talk about the disaster risk. So before I forget, my lecture actually I want to conduct recorded. So I will record my lecture, and then at the end of the session, probably around 4 at 5 p.m., we will have some Q&A sessions. So I prefer this this way of the online session because I can see if I present online, okay, if we have the synchronized session, probably the deliver of my lecture probably is not very good, okay, especially on the internet connections, and then computer, okay, so that session probably will be disturbed. So the best way is I record first my lecture, and then during our real session, okay, you guys can go through the recorded video that I will share, and then later during 4 until 5 p.m. okay, we will have some discussion, the Q&A session. So if you have any problem related the topics and content that I been deliver, so you guys can ask me during that sessions. So we start with the climate change. So understanding climate change and its effect toward floods. So this slide I put the the pictures of the polar bear. So this polar bear actually we can find in the Arctic and Antarctica, okay, at the polar area. So we can see nowadays the problem related to the melted of the ice, okay, pencairan air di kutub utara dan kutub selatan. So this situation actually is a very crucial, and it is one of the best indicator for the climate change. So people will say a lot of the impact of the climate change. Okay, kita boleh kata pemanasan global, and then there is a high rise of the sea levels. Okay, but all those things actually sometimes we cannot look by our eyes. Okay, kita tak boleh measure, kita tak boleh tengok kenaikan air laut, for example. But if we go to the north, for example, at the Arctic, okay, we can, from the television, we can see the ice have been melted, and this one will disturb the habits of the animal that live there. So this situation actually can relate with the climate change. So what is the climate change? So according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, so climate change is defined the change in the mean and its variability of its property, and this phenomena will be continued occur for an extended period, typically for decade or much long. So this IPCC actually is the board who look on the the climate change, the impact, the policy, and etc. So climate change actually is a natural phenomena. So this thing actually will be occurs, okay, over the time. Even though if there is no human activities, so the climate change still be occur. But the problem is when there is some human activities, such as burning of the forest, the industrial, okay, normally for the industrial they will burning of the fossil, okay, through the industrial, and then air pollution from the car. So all these things actually is disturb the natural phenomena, and so it will increase the rate of the climate change. So this is the graph of the global average temperature change. So you can see from 1920, okay, if I can divide into two sections for this graph. So this is the first part and this is the second part. So you can see the climate change rate actually just constant, okay, from 1880 to 1920. But the rate of the climate change, okay, suddenly increased starting from 1920, okay, until now this. So the main reason is because the human activities, okay, especially on the burning of the fossils. So you can see, normally if we want to talk about the climate change, we look at the temperature. So starting from the 1920, okay, you can see there is a slightly change of the global temperature. So you can see it's around 1 or until 2 degrees Celsius. So this situation actually is very crucial. Even though 1 degree Celsius is not so much, but in terms of the impact, actually is very, very significant, especially on the hydrology response. Okay, for example, the increase of 1% actually can cause the water sea level, okay, being increased, and then some area, okay, will facing the extreme events such as the heavy rainfall or probably the extreme droughts and so on. So that's the thing happen when we disturb the rate of the climate change. Okay, I always said this. Okay, climate change will be occurs. Okay, with or without human activities, but due to the human activities, the rate of the climate change have been increased, and that situation, okay, can really impact to our daily life. Okay, probably, in future we will have increased 1 degree Celsius of the global temperature, for I think for 100 years, but the reason because the human, okay, 1 degree Celsius will be increased probably 20 years for the future. So this one we want to overcome this thing from happen. So as I mentioned before, okay, on this slide we can categorize the cause of the climate change. The first is a natural forcing. The second thing is a human activities. So natural forcing, something like volcanic eruptions, and then sun radiations, and the ocean current circulations. So these three example actually is some sort of the natural forcing. So but this forcing actually is not contribute so much on the climate change, but the human activities such as burning of the fossil fuel, okay, which is the emission of the carbon dioxide, okay, actually is the main reason why the rate of the climate change have been significantly changed. And then other human activities such as land use changes, such as deforestation, urbanization, and desertifications. So this is the diagram on what the factors and variables that affect on the climate change. So as I mentioned before, we have a natural forcing like solar radiations, and then you have volcanoes, and then you have ocean circulations. So this is the natural forcing. But the main factors that drive the rate of climate change actually is from the human activities, okay, such as the urbanizations, and then we change the land use, okay, from the forest to the agriculture, and then we the burning of the fuel fossil, okay, from the industrial or even though from the car. So that's the factors that contribute to the climate change. So what happened in climate change? Normally, if we talk about the climate change, okay, we can relate to the emission of the carbon dioxide, which is CO2. So when there is the emission, so it will cause the greenhouse effects. So what the really of the greenhouse effect? Okay, you imagine this is the Earth and then this is the atmosphere. So greenhouse effect actually is very important to the human because we want the planet, the Earth actually become more warm. Okay, if there is no greenhouse effect, so our planet will become too hot or too cold. Okay, too hot when we facing the sun, so the surface of the earth will become hot and more and dry. But if the surface do not turn to the sun, okay, so the surface of the planet will become very cold. So this thing actually is not really good, okay, for the human. That's why we need the effect of the greenhouse to make our planet more warm and able to shield all these radiations. But what happen if there is a lot of the greenhouse at our atmosphere? So our planet will become more warm, and this situation will lead to the another problem. So that's how we need to control the emission of the carbon dioxide. So as I mentioned before, okay, greenhouse gases, okay, the most significant gases is a carbon dioxide, so which is CO2. So CO2 actually is a combustion of fossil fuel, and also the deforestation lead by to 26 increase of the CO2 in the atmosphere. As I mentioned before, the emission of the CO2 normally will be stay in the atmosphere, and the rest will be absorbed by the ocean. And then we have another greenhouse gases such as methane, and then we have CFC, and then we have the nitrous oxide. The rest of gases actually is not contribute so much, but the CO2 actually is give a very significant impact to the greenhouse gases. So we need the CO2, okay, basically. But if too much, okay, say similar like you, okay, you need to eat. Bila cakap pasal makan, saya pun suka makan kan. So kita kena makan. Tapi bila you makan banyak, so makanan tu sebenarnya tak bagus untuk kesihatan you. Kalau you ambil secara berlebihan. Tapi kalau you ambil for the small portion, this one is good for our health. So that's happened in the CO2 for the greenhouse. So this is figure of the hydrological cycle. I think most of you guys already know about the hydrological cycle. I think during our primary school pun kita dah belajar dah mengenai kitaran air. The water, okay, from the rainfall, okay, will become the runoff, and then the runoff, okay, some of it will be infiltrate to the ground, and then some of it will become, the river, and then the water from the river will go to the sea, okay, and then some of it will be evaporates, okay, and then it will the water will be transformed to the clouds, okay, and then there is a rain. So this is the circle of the water cycle. So what happened if we disturb this phenomena through the climate change? So most of the time, the parameters and also the variables that influence much from the climate change is precipitations and also the temperature. So when there is a climate change, normally the global temperature will be increased. and then this global temperature actually will disturb the phenomena of the precipitation, or dalam bahasa mudah we call as a rainfall. So we can see this hydrological cycle will be disturbed. Okay, similar like the evaporation. Okay, normally rainfall will down okay, to the surface, okay, and then it will convert to the runoff. But when there is a high temperature, okay, they will the evaporation rate will be increased. So a lot of the factors actually will be disturbed when there is a climate change. You know, the temperature, the global temperature will be increased time to time, and drought may be occurs. Okay, warmer world is likely to experience an increase in the frequency of heavy precipitation events associated with a more intense hydrological cycle and increased water holding capacity of a warmer atmosphere. So bear in your mind, climate change actually don't make our some area we facing, you know, droughts. Tak semestinya. Okay. But basically we can say that normally if the climate change actually will cause the extreme events. Okay, that's mean, okay, some area will facing a heavy rainfall, but some area, okay, will be facing a frequent of the droughts. Okay, so that's the extreme event will be occur due to the climate change.